And good afternoon, everybody. Hello and welcome. My name's Paul Grogan, and today I'm going to be interviewing the designer of Mini Express. Now, for those of you who were watching my channel earlier on, a couple of hours ago, we did a live tutorial and playthrough of Mini Express, which I won. And yes, today I have the designer. If I click this little button here, Mark should appear magically in the middle window. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Just I did my little victory dance. Yeah, did my little victory dance after the game. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me today. We're here obviously to talk to you because Mini Express is on Kickstarter right now. You are the designer of Mini Express. But yeah, we've got a few other things as well. People are saying in the chat, spoilers. I just told everybody that I won. Never mind. Right, so before we jump into all of the details and talk about the games, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, yeah. My name is Mark. I live in Belgium. I only design games as a hobby mostly. I work as a computer programmer as my day job. Yeah, I don't have a very exciting life, but
Okay. And how is the work at the moment? How is Belgium? Is it under lockdown like the rest of the world at the moment?
It's still under lockdown, but they're slowly opening things up.
Right.
So for me personally, nothing will change because I can work full time from the home.
Yeah.
But some non-essential businesses where you still have to be too close together will be opening up, but then with special rules with the mouth coverings and
Right.
all that.
Okay, so you're able to do most of your work, as you say, from home.
Yeah, it's just logging in and then it's computer programming, so it's all on
Right.
the computer.
Yeah, cool. Right, so yeah, Mini Express went live on Kickstarter yesterday. This is your second game with Mo Ideas, your first one being Mini Rails.
Yeah, it went so well that we did a second one.
Yeah, well, that's my first question actually, is Mini Express, because people told me when Mini Express was first coming out that this is the sequel to Mini Rails, and in some ways it is, because it's designed by you, it's also published by Mo Ideas. It's another train game that plays in a, simple rules but lots of depth in the gameplay. But actually, having played it now twice, I'm not seeing much similarity to Mini Rails. So if anybody's expecting like Mini Rails 2, it's not that. It is its own game.
Yeah, I consider it like a spiritual sequel, not like a direct sequel. It actually, like the earliest prototypes, it was a worker placement game where
Oh, right.
where you now have the buy shares and the build, sort of the interaction between those two actions.
Right.
That was kind of in a worker placement context of you produce goods and you use goods, and then those two influence each other, and so on. But I couldn't get that working. I think probably because for a worker placement game you need more around it. You need a heavier kind of game. You can't have really simple worker placement games. Oh, I can't design them anyway.
Right.
And so I was like, how can I still use this, because I really like this. And then I thought, oh, what, like a train game. And then I thought, okay, so maybe I can make it a sequel to Mini Rails. Maybe I can sort of build on that build or buy shares dichotomy from Mini Rails and use that for the new game then. And so, yeah, it didn't start out as a sequel to Mini Rails, and then it kind of moved into that space a little bit afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, I mean the two core actions in Mini Rails is, you either buy a share in a company or you build track with that company, which are the exact same two actions in Mini Express. But in Mini Rails, you get to do two actions around, and one of them must be buying shares and the other one must be building track. Whereas in Mini Express, you always have that option of A or B each time it's your turn.
Yeah, it opens up the game a bit more, that you have a bit more control over your actions.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about train games, because you've actually designed 3 games according to Board Game Geek. You've got Mini Rails, you've got Mini Express, and you've also got Steamrollers with another publisher.
Yeah, Steamrollers is kind of a roll and write version of Age of Steam, basically.
Okay. Right.
But I mean, I think it's more of a coincidence that all my games are train games. It's not like I only design train games, but those are the only ones that get published. So.
Right. So train games then. Let's talk about train games. Train games are one of those interesting things because some people are completely put off by any kind of train game. There's one friend I know that thinks all train games are the same. Every single train game is all exactly the same. And then there's other people that I know that only ever play train games. You know, there are hardcore 18xx players that don't play anything other than 18xx games. But train games have been around for quite a while. It seems in the last year or two that there's a definite resurgence of them, and the popularity has kind of increased. And I think the fact that there are more games coming out now that are, you know, don't take 10 hours to play, relatively simple rules, but, you know, interesting gameplay. I think that's helping promote train games as not the kind of cliquey, geeky games that they maybe used to be.
Yeah, if you think of it, one of the most gateway games that exists is a train game, right? Ticket to Ride.
Some people would argue that that's
Some
not
people
a train
would argue
game.
that it's not a train game.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
And like, if you go back, Trans-America was also like a great gateway game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think train games, they come in all sizes and all kinds and sizes. And I like designing them pretty small, but yeah, you can go all the way up to 10-hour games, and you can go all the way down to Trans-America or something.
Yeah. So I mean, you clearly like playing train games yourself. What is your favorite game?
Age of Steam.
Okay.
That's just, and that version also, because there's so many, it went through so many iterations, but Age of Steam and all its expansions, that's the sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been getting into Age of Steam in the last sort of 6 months or so, and I've played it a few times. I have played in the past. I have played Steam, and I've played Railways of the World. My perfect game would actually be 80% Age of Steam with a little bit of Steam in there. The only bit I'm not keen on from Age of Steam is the player having to make the decision at the start of the round as to how many loans they want, rather than letting them take loans. Now
it's just a nice mean thing in the game. That's one of the things I like about it.
Yeah, I think when you're playing with all players at an expert level, that's fine. But I am so often introducing games to new people, and seeing somebody make a mistake at the start of the round and go, "Oh, I didn't take enough loans." I've completely
usually what we do, if there's somebody playing their first game, we give them an emergency option to still buy some issue some shares, because otherwise it's just punishing them for nothing. But usually what happens if you play with a new guy is all the veterans are trying to block each other, and then the new guy wins. But yeah.
Okay, so Age of Steam is your favorite game of all time. What games do you enjoy playing outside of the train game genre?
I really like games with cards with a lot of text, with like maybe multiple uses and so on. Mm-hmm. Stuff like Race for the Galaxy, or Glory to Rome.
Yeah.
Or maybe on a heavier side, Through the Ages or something like.
Right.
Games where you always have to adjust your options to your cards, and then you can't do everything you want, but you have to sort of go with the flow with what you're offered at that time.
Right. Okay, cool. So we've got some questions coming in on the chat. So Philip Millman is here. Hi Philip, thank you very much for joining in. And we were actually asked this as well during the live stream of Mini Express earlier on today, but people are saying that there's comparisons between this and Irish Gauge, which has recently come out from Capstone Games.
Well, they're both Winsome type cube rail games, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the genre. I think Irish Gauge is a more traditional example of that style, with where you auction your shares and so on. While I'm guessing Mini Express is more of a Euro approach to look at the genre, I think. But yeah, they're definitely probably, if you like one, you'll like the other. I think so.
Yeah. So you touched on something there called a Winsome cube rail game. This is a whole genre it's a sub-genre of games within the train game genre. is originally published by Winsome Games, is basically games where, and they were called cube rails because you'd put cubes on the board to represent where you were building the tracks. Now we've got little wooden trains which make it look nicer, but essentially it's the same thing. Going back, what were the first cube rail games that were out there? When did they start?
I think the biggest, the most well known, and also one of the earliest was the original version was Wabash Cannonball, but everybody knows it as Chicago Express from Queen Games, and that's a very good example of the genre, and that's a very very good game also. Like my idea when I started mini rails was basically with steamrollers I simplified Age of Steam. Now with this game I'm going to simplify Chicago Express.
Okay.
But there's also other entry level of very simple Winsomes, like what's it called there, SNCF, but then in the new version, Paris Connection, that's a very nice one also. Samarkand, Roots to Riches, almost nobody mentions that one, but that's my favorite Winsome game.
Okay.
That's a really nice one. Those are nice ones to check out, but they go to pretty complicated, like Baltimore and Ohio, where you're almost playing an 18xx game.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that was another question that we got asked during the stream earlier on today. Is how does this compare to an 18xx game? And it kind of does and it doesn't, because you have companies and players will buy shares in those companies, and then the companies will build track around the board. And that's it. You know.
Yeah, I never thought of my games as like 18xx Lite.
Right.
What I think the link is Cube Rail games are 18xx Lite, and my games are the Cube Lite or something. But I think as there is no stock market in most Winsome games, and that's the biggest difference for me. As soon as you add that option to sell the shares, then it's a completely different ballpark, and then you're really into the 18xx or 18xx Lite. And I don't call my games 18xx Lite.
Right.
I think that's, but I mean, a lot of reviewers like to do so. And I can see where they're coming from, but yeah.
No, that's interesting.
I wouldn't call them so.
Yeah, that you don't feel that they are 18xx Lite games, but as you say, I've heard them called that by a lot of people. So. Right, question in the chat from Scott. Let's see if I understand what he's saying. On the operational versus shares spectrum, where do you feel Mini Express sits, or is it more in the direction of route building? So is it more about the shares, or is it more about?
That's an interesting one. I mean, the whole scoring is the shares basically.
Yeah.
I would put it more on the operational thing, because you're not selling shares, you're not influencing there's no directorship or something, so it doesn't matter who has the most shares and so on. So yeah, the main action is the building of the track, which is operational.
Yeah, and it's interesting because just from my two plays is that obviously you're building the track. You're trying to increase the value of the company that you've got the most shares in, but it's about the connections. It's about the tiles on the board, which are randomly placed at the start of the game, to increase the influence that you need, which means your shares are going to be worth points. So, yeah. Right. Another question in the chat: when designing railway-themed games, how do you ensure that the game you're designing is strategically different, but thematically the same? So in other words, you've done mini rails, and you've done which is there's different companies and players are thematically they're the same, and there's a lot of similarities, but you've designed two games that are very different. Was there a time when you were designing Mini Express that you kind of did something and then you thought, oh no, I can't do that because I've already done that in mini rails, so I'll have to do something different?
Well, I design from usually like an idea I have or something, right? So with mini rails, that was like, let's try to simplify Chicago Express.
Yeah.
With Mini Express, I started from such a different direction, and that was actually how to make a Dutch auction work as a mechanism, and that's like so different that the game the game is going to be very different also.
Right.
Like I said, it didn't even start out as a train game originally.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, the starting point is so different. The starting point isn't I want to make a train game. The starting point is there's this weird thing like Dutch auctions in this case that I want to do something with, and then the game follows from there.
Right. Okay, cool. So I had some questions in on my BGG guild in advance, so thank you very much to people who ask questions in advance. So Mohammed wants to know, in these types of games, he feels that, or he finds that analysis paralysis is a bit of a problem, because with no randomness after the initial setup of the board, some players can find that they agonize too long over decisions and slow the game down. How does Mini Express handle this situation?
By making it very, very interactive with the other players. Like the board only changes slowly. You have the setup of your cities, and then the trains will move around a bit. But the situation of the train companies changes a lot. So,
Yeah.
as you know, like if they have one train of 5 trains in their supply, it's a completely different situation.
Yeah.
And you can't really make like a 3-step plan or something like this turn I will do that, and then second turn it will do that, and then third turn I'll do that, because it changes too much.
Yeah.
You can have a global objectives, and you want to make this company great and maybe sort of use that company to boost the other one. But you always have to evaluate from scratch almost the situation and how can I now best accomplish that goal.
Yeah.
It's more in that sense it's more tactical than strategical. You just can't plan too far ahead. It's in specifics.
Okay.
And also like keep the design, keep the choices limited, right? Or you build or you buy, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And question in from another Mohammed now. Are there any parts of Mini Express that, while you were designing it, you had to then cut out?
I always have to add things to my games.
Okay.
I mean, one thing I kind of miss is that the original design, building on mini rails also to have the same idea, was modular. So you had like 7 tiles that you could place as you want, and so sometimes the companies start together, sometimes they start on opposite sides, and so on. That was kind of nice, but we went with more like historical, thematical map, and maybe more maps. We'll see. Spoilers. But yeah, so that modular bit, I do like it. I like very variable starting setups. So yeah, that was even more now. Now you still have the variability with the tokens, but then even the configurations of the cities could be different.
Right. Now, can you talk a little bit about the things which I found in the back of this prototype rulebook? Some rules about the western coast of this map.
Yeah, so actually that's something that MoID's game design came up with. So like with mini rails, basically my prototype and the finished games are like one-on-one mapping. They didn't change. But with Mini Express, I had it almost finished when it was UK Game Expo. I didn't have time anymore to keep developing it afterwards, so I gave it to MoIDs, and they did most of the final development, and that bit was one of the things. Well, at that time there wasn't a US map, so I made a US map, and then they came up with a rule that you can jumpstart on the west coast.
Right.
Then maybe connect both coasts, which I think that might still be a stretch goal or something that will add to the game.
Fact, Frank's in the chat, and Frank's saying that he can answer that, but obviously the chat is 10 to 15 seconds delayed for us. So I'll let Frank talk in the chat. That's fine. So you've hinted there possibly other maps in future?
There exist some maps. I don't know what MoIDs is doing with them. Right. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of train games. Yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't just have a different map with different cities, and it would play out in a slightly different way.
Yeah, there's some feedback to the rules again because we made the United States where everything starts together on the West
On
Coast,
the
the
East
East
Coast.
Coast,
Yeah.
on the East Coast. We had to change also how like blocking and so on worked, and so
Yeah.
there is some feedback between the map and the rules,
Yeah.
but yeah, because the base design was modular, it could be adapted easily to different types of maps.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Speaking of future games, what other games have you got in the pipeline at the moment? Have you got some ideas for new games that might be coming in the next few years?
Yeah, I'm not the most prolific designer, but I do have things I'm working on. There's one design that I keep trying to sell because I think it's the best thing I've ever done, which
Okay.
is like a tiny little abstract game called Oort, but it's so tiny that it's just a bunch of cubes
Okay.
that that most publishers everybody I show it immediately likes it, but commercially it's less interesting. So
Right.
still hoping to place that one there. And then I have like I'm trying to make a roll and write version of Twilight Struggle.
Oh,
So
cool.
like I did with with Age of Steam. And yeah, I have some designs that I showed to Mo IDs that I might be interested in also. So same weight type of things as mini rails. We'll see if anything happens with those.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Right, a question in that's coming from my BGG guild from Nico wants to know what's your most memorable gaming experience, if you have one.
My most memory. I don't know. I mean, I think you need to play much more thematic games to have really like in-game memorable
Mm-hmm.
moments. But like, there's always like weird places you play or people you play with. Like I remember going to one of those when Heidelberger was still like before they were bought up by Asmodee.
Yeah.
We had this weekend where they invited like publishers and all their volunteers into like this crazy little castle on the top of a mountain in
Okay.
Germany, and that was really nice. Like with at night you had like fire breather demonstrations and
Right.
entertainment and so on. So that was really cool. Like it, I was completely exhausted walking up the mountain. I thought I was gonna die. And then when I was like clutching my chest, like Corné van Moorsel, the author of Factory Fun, comes
Yeah.
jogging up the path. Like, oh my god. But yeah, no. Actually, in game, I don't know. There was one of Through the Ages where I won because everybody else forfeited. So maybe that, but
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Okay.
it was a chain reaction of
Right. Okay.
forfeits.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying because I've traditionally I've been a hardcore Euro gamer. The theme to me in a game doesn't matter. I'm all about the mechanisms, and I've had some amazing Euro games that I've played over the years. But in the last few years, the memorable experiences that I've had have come from games like Time Stories, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. There's things that happen in that game because of the narrative
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what's happened that has just been an absolute wow moment that's stuck in my mind. More so than, oh, do you remember that time in Madeira where somebody did a move and managed to get 12 points? Well, I can't remember that, but suddenly you wrap the narrative around it, and yeah, I've had some really, really good experiences from that. Another question in from the chat from Bruce. He's asking, do you design games individually or collaboratively?
Individually.
Okay.
Of course, there's play testing, and then where there's some sort of collaboration sometimes happening. But no, I wouldn't mind trying to collaborate on a game design, but so far I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah. For my limited experience of collaborating on game design, it's quite tricky.
I can,
You need
I
to
can definitely
establish
understand.
who's going to make the decision, who's in charge, and who's
Yeah.
helping. I'm sure there are some people who can co-design fine, but obviously, if you're disagreeing with somebody on something, at some point somebody has to make a decision on it. So, is there any other designers you would like to collaborate with if given the opportunity?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, there's tons of them. Yeah, there's 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 some well-known designers, of course. You think, oh, if we could work with them, but also like
Hmm.
there's lots of like smaller designers who are coming up now who are doing really interesting stuff. I think. Also, in my local play group, there's some people that I think have like brilliant ideas sometimes.
Okay.
So yeah, like just to name maybe one name is Grégoire Olivier. Maybe you don't know him, but he made the game Hope a while back.
Okay.
It was like a really disastrous Kickstarter, but the game had interesting ideas and pirate tunes and so on. And he always manages to surprise me with like
Right.
crazy ideas, and that's I think that's the best thing you can do as a designer is to really surprise people with something
Yeah.
instead of making an incremental improvement, maybe. Yeah.
So your first published game was Mini Rails, is that right?
Um,
Or was it Steamrollers?
it was Steamrollers, but Steamrollers first came out in like 200 copies edition or something.
Right.
So it took a while to the official edition was an after Mini Rails, but yeah,
Okay.
it came first.
Okay. But when did you actually start trying to design games?
Uh, I think that's 10 years ago or something now.
Okay.
That's when I started working in Brussels, and I started playing in a group where there were other designers, and so you make that click like, oh, these are normal flawed
Yeah.
human beings like you and I, so maybe we can try this also. Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah. I
then
mean, I.
it took quite a while for me to make a design that was actually play worthy.
Yeah, well, it's taken you less time than I, because I was designing games in the late 90s and I've still not managed to get one yet that's very good. I think I've found my role in life is as a game developer rather than a designer. I think
And,
that.
honestly, I have the utmost respect for developers because that is my weakness, like the fine tuning and the
Yeah,
development. Yeah, I'm happy that Mo ideas did that for this game because that's definitely not one of my strengths.
right. Yeah. No, it's interesting because before I worked in the industry, I didn't really understand the whole difference between it. And now now I understand it because I work with a number of designers that have amazing ideas, really, really clever, off the wall ideas. And then when you actually sit down and try using them, they're like, well, this just doesn't work at all, right? But your idea is fantastic. And then 6 months later, after you try a number of different options, you've managed to keep exactly the theme and exactly the ideas that they wanted, but you've actually implemented it in a way that works. Yeah, so it's really nice to see that.
Yeah, that's great development. Sometimes it can go
Yeah,
wrong, but if it goes right, it's amazing.
yeah. Right. What other questions have we got in here? So what were the games that inspired you to start designing yourself, or was it just the presence of the other people in your playgroup?
It was a presence, and it was the yeah just the presence of the people and like trying it for myself. Yeah, the kinds of games that inspired me, those are usually like really simple games like Colorado or things
Yeah.
like. I think there's something like really special about those games. Like if you presented me Colorado and said, oh yeah, this was invented in the 16th century with like a special deck of cards and so on,
Hmm.
I would believe you because it's such a pure design. Like if you presented me on Mars and said this was invented in the 16th century, I might doubt you a bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, those kind of games, I think that's sort of the holy grail to make it like a no thanks
Yeah.
or something like that. Those are really yeah.
Yeah. Right. Another question in from Bruce. Do you know from the start of a game design what you would want the style and the appearance to look like? Or is that part of the creative process? Or, and I'm going to add to Bruce's question, is how it's going to actually look like outside of your hands completely?
Outside completely.
Right.
Like If you look at my prototypes, they're like very stark, black and white, no artwork almost to speak of. And yeah, I leave it to the publisher,
Hmm.
who's better at that than me, to come up with a good design. Like the original Mini Express, my prototype was called Intercity Rails,
Okay.
and what there was of graphically was all very modern and so on. So then they sort of scaled it back to like the start of the railroad revolution in the United States,
Right.
and I think that's fair. I mean, that's I'm for me it's all about the rules, the mechanisms,
Yeah.
the thematic aspects. I mean, it could have been laying sewers in New York for all that really matters to me, and what the
Yeah.
final theme is.
Yeah. So speaking of theme, Jason Patterson is in the YouTube chat, and he's got a good question. Does your interest in trains translate to the real world? Are you a train enthusiast?
Um, yeah, but it worked the opposite way, right? It's because I liked train games that I also now
Right.
sometimes go to the train museum or something. So
Okay.
we have an awesome train museum here in Belgium, which I've visited a few times, which is just real nice. But yeah, it came from train games and not from being a train enthusiast towards train
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
And there's so much interesting history where you can base game ideas on, like, yeah, so it's a rich vein to mine.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing about trains is a very kind of, romantic idea, I think, in some ways that a lot of people just feel fascinated with them. I remember, when I was a kid, I had model railways, and I always wanted to convert our attic at the house where I used to live into a big proper model railway. And I'm 50 this year, and I still don't have my own model. I always said when I'm 40 years old, I'm going to have my own proper model railway. And now I'm 50 this year, I still don't have it. But there's something just nice about it. And there's another thing as well, because I've played Brass a few times. Now, Brass, for those people who don't know, is a game in two halves. And in the first half of the game, you're building up these canal routes. And then the Industrial Revolution kind of thing happens, and the trains come in, and people stop using the canal routes because people can now use the trains instead. And that's what happens in the game. Now, this is going back a few years now, but me and my partner, we decided one day we're going to go out for the day somewhere and we're going to do something very different. And we saw that there was a local thing happening, well, local-ish, near us, and they were giving free tours. Normally it's chargeable, but there was this special event and they were giving free tours for the day. And it was on one of the areas where the canals used to be. And we walked around some of the sites of the old canals, which of course are now, filled in or unused or anything like that. And he was telling us the history of how important this canal route was. And then, of course, the trains came along and it all got disused. And it sort of gave me a bit more of a... I mean, I was clearly then more interested in that part of history, especially because it's near to where we live. But also it gave me more appreciation of the board game Brass for, dealing with something that actually happened. It's nice when a board game thematically represents something that happened in the real world.
Yeah, there's also a great game, Canal Mania, which is sort of like a train game with canals, with sort
Yeah.
of a ticket to ride sort of card mechanism. And I remember one of the things you can do there is you can build a canal over another canal, like you would do with railways, also like a crossing.
Okay.
And you'd go like, what? This doesn't make sense. Like, why would you build a canal like crossing over another canal?
Yeah.
And then there's like a photo apparently somewhere in England. You have a canal, like water going over
Another
another
one.
canal.
Yeah, I mean, that's England. We'd probably
That's
had too much
crazy.
cider on a Friday afternoon is probably what that was. There is an interesting question in the chat. I don't know if you've played the game Crusaders Thy Will Be Done.
No.
I haven't either, but he's suggesting that that's a train game in disguise.
I completely believe them. There's so many train games in this
That's the thing.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've not played it either, but I think he's right in that there are a number of games out there where the theme of the game isn't trains, but actually you're thinking, wait a minute, this is a train game. This is totally a train game.
And then you have the reverse, right, where you have a train
Yeah.
theme, but it's not really. Is it a train game or not?
Yeah.
Like what's the big Euro there, which I'm blanking on the name. Russian railroads.
Russian Railroads.
Yeah.
Is that a train game? And I don't think Russian Railroads is a train game.
I wouldn't call it one either. But then
No.
like you get to the gray zone, like Ticket to Ride and so on. Like
Yeah.
is it a train game? Is it not? Yeah.
Yeah. Another question in from Jerome in the chat. Is it always mechanics and rules over theme in games that you play? So of the games that you like, would you play any games just for the theme that may not be that good mechanically? Or do you prefer a good game mechanically?
Yeah, I always go over mechanics over themes. Now, sometimes a theme can be so off-putting that I don't like the game. So that could go into it. But normally it's all like colored cubes and numbers for me once I'm playing a game. Now I do like also the recent genre of escape room games and
Right.
that kind of things. Who are that there the theme obviously is really important.
Yeah.
But for like a normal multiplayer Euro thing, it's all about. And I don't really play much thematic games or what they used to call Ameritrash or anything.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. A nice theme will add to the game, but if it mechanically isn't good, I'm not going to enjoy the game, no matter what the theme is. So right, just having a look through the questions that I got asked. Let's just go back to Mini Express again and the comparisons to Mini Rails. What would you say is the most significant difference or differences between the two games?
I think the obvious one is the board, right? One of the criticism that Mini Rails, maybe rightly so, got is that the board doesn't really feel like a train game. You're not really connecting cities and so on. And with this one, you really have like a traditional train game board play. I think for me personally, behind the hood, I'm quite happy that I found a completely different way to get rid of money. To make it moneyless in a different way. So yeah, that's for me as a designer the biggest difference.
Yeah, because a lot of train games, money is a part of the game. You have to spend money in order to build track and things like that. But both Mini Rails and Mini Express, they don't have money. It's just assumed that you have whatever money you need to build the track, and it's the other factors that are important.
Yeah, I guess that part of that for simplifying the game. Part of that might be the socialist in me. I don't know.
The other thing that I liked about Mini Express, which I haven't seen in other train games, but I haven't played that many of them, is that when you choose where you're building a route, many train games is like, right, you can lay 3 or 4 pieces of track, off you go. You just lay where you want. In Mini Express, you pick a city that you want to build to. So thematically that works, because nobody would ever build track just in the middle of nowhere. And you have to take the shortest route, which also thematically fits. And in other train games, you kind of don't have that. You can build where you want.
Yeah, it's funny that sometimes you want to use the least optimal routes in train games, like in the Age of Steam, you want to, if you can do it in 6 deliveries instead of 1, you'll
do it in 6.
That,
yeah. So that's nice. I mean, had you ever experimented with a game where you allowed players to just build as much track as they wanted?
No, not that. I mean, in both cases, that really wasn't an option.
Right.
Like in Mini Rails, you have the 1 disk, and also for Mini Express, you need that limit to make the interaction with the buying shares work. If they can build anything they want, then it completely breaks down. But I mean, it's an option to look at. I think sometimes you have sort of the danger of some designs like Paris Connection is that you can have build players who really like building stuff and build everything out, and then you have moochers sometimes who profit from it. And that can really work well in a game, but usually then it doesn't. It's not really family friendly. It's not really So I explicitly try to avoid that interaction in Mini Rails and in a lesser degree in Mini Express.
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying earlier on about reducing analysis paralysis, if, for example, the rules for Mini Express were you can build whatever track you want wherever you want, suddenly the number of choices you have increases exponentially. Whereas now it's, right, what do I need influence in? I need influence in steel and cotton right, I'm going to build to there, and then that's it. Once you've decided where you're building to, the rules about how you build there are fairly strict. So by reducing the number of options a player has, you're reducing, the analysis paralysis in there.
Yeah, you want to be just at that limit where they have enough options, but not too many options to keep things interesting. Yeah.
Yep. So let's wrap things up with a couple of final questions. What do you think is the future of train games, or is it going to continue like we have right now?
I think we are at the beginning of a bit of a surge. There's Rio Grande is still publishing them. You have Capstone Games now.
Yep.
You have Eagle Games are still doing them. MoIDs now. You have upcoming designers like Travis Hill and other people who are making new games. It looks like it's going. Maybe it's never going to be the dominant type of game, but I think it has a healthy future. Yeah.
Yeah. And, as we touched on earlier on, I think with the amount of new train games that are coming out, which are accessible, so easy to teach, quick to play and everything else, I don't think that's going to take away the emphasis from the longer, more complicated train games. I think the people who still like an 8-hour or 10-hour game of 18xx can still play that. And I think those games are still very strong, and they're coming out, there's a lot of them coming out on a regular basis. So, yeah, I just think it's good. I'm hoping it removes a little bit of potentially the stigma against train games, and that train games can be cool, and they're not the 4-hour epic complex game that a lot of people associate with them.
Yeah, it depends what your first exposure is, right? If your first exposure is 18xx, you have a completely different view than if it's Chicago Express or something.
Yeah. Jerome has just asked a question, but I think we answered this earlier on, were there things in the original design of Mini Express that were cut during playtesting? And I think you said that you actually had to add things in rather than cut them.
Yeah, but especially with mini rails, so the whole turn order thing was added in. Mini Express, the blocking worked differently. You could sort of, but it's nothing substantially was cut.
Okay, so let's flip the question on the head then. What substantially was added to the game that wasn't in there in the original design?
So in the original design, you only had one influence for entering a city, or 1, 2, or 3 of the same. But then that was a thing that needed to be developed a bit. The balancing with the values of the companies, because also my version was harsher. Like if you weren't at the top 2 or 3, you got 0 points, no matter how much influence you had.
Yeah.
Then the fact that if you built on top of another company, that they get trains added to their stock, so you can raise the price of other companies. That was actually a great idea that MoID said, that I was actually kind of resistant to it at the beginning, but that worked out really well. Yeah. So
cool. It's nice to see a game go through development like this. Another question in from Paul, based on your earlier comments about simplified worker placement games. Have you played 18 Lilliput?
Yes. They're great designers, but that game that just completely didn't work for me. Not a fan of 18 Lilliput, I'm afraid.
Right. No, I've not tried that one. Right. Okay. Well, we've been about 45 minutes, which is what we'd planned for this. Is there anything else you wanted to add in? Any questions you wanted me to ask that I haven't asked?
No, you were pretty thorough. No, just like if anybody hasn't checked out the Kickstarter yet, please do so. I think MoIDs have some nice stretch goals planned, which I'm looking forward to also, because I don't know them. I don't know them either. So,
they talked earlier on in the stream about a solo mode.
Yeah, so I think one of the ways they did 2-player mode was to add a bot for the third player. And I'm guessing that's how their solo mode also will work, so that you're playing against 1 or 2 bots. That's something that I left completely to them because they did such a great job at Symphony Number 9
Yeah,
to make that two-player version work.
yeah.
So I gave it one shot, didn't work. So okay, I'll leave it to you guys.
Yeah, Symphony Number 9 is a great game, and I've played it two-player once. I wouldn't recommend playing it two-player as your first game of it, which is what I did, because that's the situation we're in. But once you play it two-player and you realise, oh, actually, this is really clever how this works. So yeah, if they're able to do, because solo gaming is becoming more and more popular. Solo gaming is not something at all that I would associate with any kind of train game, but if they can make it work, then that's great.
Yeah, SteamWorld. I made a solo version also, and like also against the bot, and I think that's the best way. I don't really like solo games where it's like, okay, if you reach 50 points, you have a great score. If you reach 60 points, you have an excellent score. It's like, no, you win or you lose, basically. And I'm glad that Moed did the same thing with Mini Express.
Right. I mean, I have mixed opinions on that. The ones which are just blatantly score as many points as you want, as you can. Yeah, I kind of want to have a target, but also I like variable difficulty settings. So, if they can say, oh, the target is to get 35 points, you win. Once you've won at that, I then want a new target kind of thing. So it's otherwise you play the game and you win and you're like, right, that's it, I'm done. I've played it and I've beaten it. So yeah, I can see both sides of it. So, right then, thank you very much for your time today. Yeah, I hope the Kickstarter goes well. As I say, it's already funded, but there's lots of stretch goals to go. So if you're interested in Mini Express, go and check out the Kickstarter. Somebody said yesterday about mini rails. Is mini rails available as part of this Kickstarter?
Yeah, they have a bundle that you can get both games, and you can have it as an extra add-on also, I think. So yeah. If you missed out on mini rails, this is a way to get it.
Definitely, yeah, and I know mini rails was definitely hard to get hold of at some point, but yeah, and whilst they are both by the same designer, by the same publisher, the same theme, and they're fairly simple rules and they play quickly, they're very different games. I think there's definitely still a place for both games in there. I'm not going to say which one my favourite one is. I think I have one, although I have only played this one twice, but yeah, I'll tell you that privately. So yeah, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much to everybody for joining in the chat. And I will see you back here. What time is it now? 10 to 4. I will be back here at 5 o'clock with my own live Q&A where I'm interviewing myself. So that's at 5 o'clock today, my monthly live Q&A if you're interested in me answering all sorts of crazy questions, usually about socks. Right, thank you very much, Mark. I will see you soon.
See you.
Gaming Rules is proudly sponsored by Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Visit GameToppersLLC.com.